Hello, a very warm good evening to all wonderful people present here. We are back as promised last week with a very special guest to add an beautiful milestone in our journey to explore sun in this lecture series. This lecture series is from the Consultorium. Physical Sciences Consultorium is a consortium of experienced professionals to offer our expertise to educational institutions, industry organizations, and newcomers to, to encourage innovation, build collaboration, and mitigate confusion. The co-host of this lecture series is Science for Everyone. Science for Everyone is a dedicated science outreach platform. It aims to become a bridge between young students and experienced professionals. It works for the popularization of science and aims to connect with people from diverse fields in a holistic approach. With this brief introduction of hosting platforms, I take this opportunity to invite the chairperson of this lecture series, Professor B.M. Dixit, to chair this session. Professor Dixit is Professor of Physics and Director of Institute of Natural Sciences and Humanities at Sri Ram Swaroop Memorial University, Lucknow. Dear sir, I am humbled by your esteemed presence. I request you for welcome address to this gathering. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Okay. Lalit, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. Dr. Ragesh, am I audible there?
Yes, sir.
I am welcoming all people across the globe who have joined this program, this lecture series, which was well conceived by one of my colleagues, Lalit, uh, under the two very promising platforms of physical science consultorium and science for everyone. We have already a very interesting inaugural session is talk by two very eminent personality who were among us in last Friday. I'm quite sure that most of us have enjoyed that moment also. A very interesting discussion by Professor Kuljeet Kaur Madam and Ritesh Mishra ji. They have given us an overall idea that how we are looking into our solar system, what type of science we do to understand our solar system. And in that series today, uh, we are starting the center of the solar system. We are going to talk about uh, the star of the solar system. The star has स्टार के दोनों मतलब हैं. एक स्टार का मतलब तारा भी है और एक स्टार का मतलब स्टार जैसी चीज भी है, क्योंकि उसी की वजह से जीवन की उत्पत्ति और पृथ्वी पे लाइफ फॉर्म और मैं, आप, ललित, आगे सब लोग इस दुनिया में आए हैं और इतने काबिल हो पाए हैं कि इस तरीके की गुत्थियों को सुलझाने की कोशिश करें. We try to see that how things have started up. हम लोगों ने अपने पिछले लेक्चर देखिए, चूंकि ये लेक्चर सीरीज है इसलिए आई रिक्वेस्ट ऑल माय ऑडियंस to be with us on every Friday prime time at 8 p.m. in India. IST, Indian Standard Time. Because you see, it is a connective thing. Connectivity is very important. हम लोगों ने लास्ट लेक्चर में भी इसकी बात की थी कि साइंस हैज अ ट्रिमेंडस स्कोप ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग. व्हाट इज द ब्यूटी ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग? स्टोरी टेलिंग की खूबसूरती क्या है? उसमें एक कथानक जो शुरू होता है वो अपने आगे की चीजों के साथ जुड़ता जाता है. हर अगला चैप्टर अपने पिछले चैप्टर को आगे ले जाता है. लेक्चर सीरीज का भी यही पर्पस है कि हमने एक जो बातचीत शुरू की है, नो योर सोलर सिस्टम, नो आवर सोलर सिस्टम, उसको हम लोग परत दर परत, अगर हम लोग कहें लेयर बाय लेयर, टॉपिक बाय टॉपिक एक्सप्लोर करेंगे. और इस एक्सप्लोरेशन को करने के लिए जो एक्सपर्ट्स की रिक्वायरमेंट है, जो उस क्षेत्र के जानकार लोग हैं, वो कम से कम इस चीज के साथ जुड़े हुए हैं. आज हमारे साथ में जो स्पीकर आज बोलने जा रहे हैं, मैं जानता हूं कि जो जो यंगनेस है, जो युवापन है, वो किसी एक काम के करने के तजुर्बे के साथ में उसकी लिंकेज उतनी नहीं होती. क्योंकि जो भी वैज्ञानिक हैं वो हमेशा युवा रहते हैं अपने उस टॉपिक को लेकर के. तो वागेश, डॉक्टर वागेश मिश्रा इज विथ अस फ्रॉम अ वेरी प्रेस्टिजियस इंस्टीट्यूशन. मतलब यहाँ सुनने वाले बहुत सारे छात्र जो लोग एस्पिरेंट हैं साइंस को लेकर के कि वो कुछ आगे करना चाहते हैं, उनके लिए तो शायद ये एक एस्पिरेशनल जगह है. दैट मैक्स प्लैंक इंस्टीट्यूट इन जर्मनी is really a premier most institution among the top institution in the world. और वहाँ सोलर सिस्टम, सोलर सेंटर के तत्वाधान में, उसके प्रीमाइस में he is pursuing his post doctoral fellowship. अपने स्टूडेंट कम्युनिटी के लिए ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि पोस्ट डॉक्टरल फेलोशिप एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण कदम होता है एक साइंटिस्ट के जीवन में, जहां से वो एकदम से अलग कैटेगरी ऑफ साइंटिस्ट की उसमें दौर में चला जाता है. सो वागेश इज a scientist in a sense that he is practicing it for many years and he has an exposure of the best institutions in the world. तो इनके द्वारा जो भी हमें अभी सुनने को मिलेगा, आप सभी को जो कुछ भी सुनने को मिलेगा, ये एक मैं इसको अश्योर कर सकता हूं अपने सारे ऑडियंस को कि वो अपने आप में एक अनुभूति होगी. दैट वुड बी अ वेरी स्पेशल व्हाट यू कैन से एक मोटिवेशनल सिचुएशन होगी हम सभी के लिए. क्योंकि ये जिन चीजों को बताने जा रहे हैं वो हम लोगों ने जो आम जिंदगी में, आम पढ़ाई लिखाई के दौरान में जो भी जाना है सन के बारे में, उससे वो काफी भिन्न है. ये काफी उसके गहराई से कुछ पहलुओं को देखने की और बताने की कोशिश करेंगे. हमने ये भी इनसे रिक्वेस्ट की है क्योंकि हम लोग जिस फोरम में हैं उसमें हम बहुत डीप साइंस रिसर्च की बात नहीं कर पाएंगे डायरेक्ट, इसलिए ये चीजों को धीरे धीरे बिल्टअप करके वैज्ञानिक दृष्टिकोण को डेवलप करेंगे, जिससे कि हमारे यंग स्टूडेंट्स, यंग साइंस जो साइंस एस्पिरेंट्स हैं उनको भी उसका फायदा मिले. और मैं तो इतना श्योर हूं कि अगले बीतने वाले कुछ 1 घंटे करीब वो मेरे लिए एक बहुत ही लर्निंग एक्सपीरियंस होगा. क्योंकि मैं भी बहुत कुछ पढ़ता रहता हूं, लेकिन किसी एक एक्सपर्ट से सुनना उसके पूरे एक्सपीरियंस से कुछ चीजों को देखना ये अद्भुत एक एक्सपीरियंस है. So with these words, I am again thanking Vagesh Mishra, Dr. Vagesh Mishra, that he is sparing his precious time. हम लोग समय के भी उसमें हैं, टाइम लैग में भी हैं, क्योंकि अलग अलग समय पर समय अंतराल अलग अलग है. हम लोगों की जितनी अंडरस्टैंडिंग है तो 5 साढ़े 5 घंटे 6 घंटे का अंतर, इस टाइप का कुछ अंतर होगा यहाँ और वहाँ के समय में. इस चीज को बनाने और सोचने में ललित की भूमिका एक बहुत ही सराहनीय है. और हम सब की हमेशा ये कोशिश रहेगी कि ललित के इस तरह के एफर्ट्स को हम सभी लोग हर तरह से सपोर्ट कर पाएं और इसको हम लोग लेकर के आगे भी बढ़ेंगे. With these words, I am stopping here and I am calling back Lalit to welcome our invited speaker for his talk on the star of our solar system, the sun. Thank you very much, Lalit. Over.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a nice welcome address. It tells the motivation behind the work and this lecture series. I am thrilled to introduce you our invited speaker for this very first session of this series. We have today with us Dr. Vagesh Mishra to tell us about the star of our solar system, the sun. Dr. Vagesh Mishra did his schooling from Devariya city of Uttar Pradesh and then BSc and MSc from Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gorakhpur University, Gorakhpur. For pursuing his PhD, he joined Physical Research Laboratory, PRL, Ahmedabad as Junior Research Fellow, and then he started working in solar and heliospheric physics at Udaipur Solar Observatory in the year 2011. Soon after submitting his PhD thesis, he was awarded a prestigious President's International Fellowship Initiative, PIFI, for postdoctoral fellowship from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He worked as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Science and Technology of China, and there he led a project as a PI, having received a research fund award for international young scientists from NNSFC. Currently, he is working as postdoctoral fellow at world-renowned Max Planck Institute for Solar System Research in Germany. Before he moved to Germany, he worked as a visiting researcher for a couple of months at George Mason University in United States of America. He has published several articles in reputed international journals and also has made several presentations at national and international conferences. His research interests are understanding the sun, coronal mass ejection, heliospheric and space weather, some to say. In addition to his research activities, his passion for science outreach, his love for poetry, and compassion for common people make him stand out of the crowd. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation with such a short notice from a very busy schedule. Thank you again for accepting our invitation and joining us with us. To facilitate an interaction with participants, we have a dedicated question and answer session after the lecture. Participants are requested to put their questions in comment in live streaming. The host will put selected questions for discussion after the lecture. With this formal introduction and announcements for this, I invite our invited speaker, Dr. Vagish Mishra, for his presentation. Thank you. Over to you.
Hello. So, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you so much. First, Professor Dikshit sir for giving chairing the lecture series and giving welcome address. And I also thank Lalit for organizing such an outreach project which is dedicated to students who can learn a lot from the series of lectures to know about solar system. In fact, the idea to have this consultorium is very much appreciated, and I am really thankful to Lalit that he contacted me, and I am very much happy, and in fact feel proud to be part of this lecture series. So, as Lalit have described that I work on the sun, so understanding the sun has been in the history, various cultures around the globe, be it like Greek culture or Indian culture and different mythology have taken sun in a very different perspective. They have studied it, they have observed with naked eye various phenomena, and it has been reported in various texts. Some historical texts, even in India, there are many pre-Buddhist texts where things about sun have been mentioned. So we can see that the sun has gathered attention since a very long time. It is because if we think that sun is the primary source because of which we live, as the Dikshit mentioned. So our life is governed by the sun, and without sun we cannot expect any life on the earth. So it is no surprise that all the cultures around the globe have considered understanding the sun, observing the sun into much detail. Even in the India, we have one old observatory in Jaipur, Savai Jai Singh, in where they have some astronomical instrument, which studied the sun, solar time, and all. So we can see that even in the thousands years before, there were attempts to build observatory. But with development in science, we now understand sun into a very different perspective. We consider it as a star, and then we study in the context how it affects our life, whether it be terrestrial weather or whether it be the weather in space. So today, while as I proceed for my lectures, I would like to go to my slides so that it would be easy for students to grasp what I mention meanwhile. And I am well informed that many of the audience are students, like school students. So I would be feeling to keep my talk at a very general level so that everyone who listens to this talk can learn and understand a few things. So Lalit, can I go to my presentation now?
Yes, yes, it is there. You can
Okay, so thank you. So the topic of today, what I would be discussing in our daytime star. So the outline of my talk would be first I would give a brief introduction about the sun, like what it is made of, how big it is, where it is located into this universe, and then I would like to discuss about the phenomena which gives the because of which the sun shines, and that is the nuclear fusion. So I would discuss the mass loss in the solar interior. Then I would discuss the Siamese and solar wind, which are some of the energetic phenomena on the sun, which affects our weather into space. And then I would conclude my talk. So to give an introduction, when we look into the sky, we see various stars. So our sun is one average star into sky, and this is very close to us, and that's why it becomes so special to us. If we see other stars in astronomy, and if we have if someone study, then find that sun have average. Sun is an average star. It has the mass, temperature, density, everything like a very an average, not very heavy and light in both cases. So to compare some of the parameters, sun is 150 million kilometers away from the Earth. So if we see the travel,
that's what you spoke, and please continue. Sorry for this interruption. We will make it. We will manage it.
Okay, yeah, thank you, and sorry for the interruption. So what I was describing is Earth is in the habitable zone, and it can support life on the Earth. When I say habitable zone, it means it is the range of orbits around a star in which any star can support liquid water and at a given atmospheric pressure. So what we see here that Sun is the one star in our Milky Way galaxy system. So in this Milky Way galaxy, if we see, Sun is at 25,000 light year away from the center of the galaxy. So when I say light years, it means that light with the distance in which light travels in 1 year. So we can see that it is a huge distance given the speed of light, which is very fast. We can see that Sun is at the very spiral arm of our galaxy, and astronomer thinks that most of the stars in our galaxy in fact have planets orbiting around them, and those planets are called extrasolar planets. Many scientists in India and abroad are trying to identify and locate such extrasolar planets into our solar system, into our galaxy. So before I go further, I would like to mention how the life and death of the star takes place. So the general understanding is that stars are formed from via the gravitational collapse into the molecular cloud. Once such gravitational collapse happens, due to the pressure at the core of the cloud, heat generates, and that heat makes the star very hot gas into the space, and that is called protostar. Further, the protostar collects matter, the dust and gases from the around the surrounding, and becomes more massive and massive. Once it becomes more massive, the again gravitational contraction becomes sufficient to lead a temperature rise at the core of the star, at which the nuclear fusion starts at the core. The star which have nuclear fusion at its core are called the main sequence star. So most of the stars spend a lot of their lifetime into the main sequence. After this main sequence, depending on the mass of the star can go into different subsequent phase of red giant or neutron star or black hole. They are the final like remnants of the star. So if we consider a star of mass like our sun, so like one solar mass, so what it would happen as the nuclear fusion in the core goes on and goes on, and then we have lot of helium into the core of the our sun. Then the nuclear fusion of hydrogen starts at the other spherical layers of the sun, and then the star would become like a red giant. It would expand, the outer layer of the star would of our sun would expand very fast, and it would be expelled into the form of a planetary nebula, and the remnant of our star would become white dwarf. If some stars are more massive, then they can go into the supergiant phase. After supernova explosions, they can go into the neutron star or black hole. So we can see that the mass of a star is very important to decide its journey, and astronomers have concluded that very massive stars lived for a short time, like only millions of years, but very light stars can spend their lifetime can be very long, like trillions of years in fact. So if we see we have already looked that there are many stars into our Milky Way galaxy, but the one nearest star to our sun is the Alpha Centauri, and we can see that even this nearest star to our sun, to our Earth, is at least 4.37 light years away from the sun. So we can clearly see that our sun is very close to us, and any other star which is closer than, which is next closer to sun, is like Alpha Centauri, and it is so much away. And then we have in between Oort cloud, from where some of the comets are known to come into our solar system. And if we see in this figure, there is a spacecraft called Voyager. This is any human-made space probe which has gone this much far into the heliosphere, and it is around I think 200 astronomical unit from the sun. So we can see that still we have not sent any of our missions to much away from this, and this Voyager 1 was launched around 40 years back. So we can see that one human-made spacecraft took this much time to reach only up to 200 astronomical units from the sun. So we can see that sun is the very much important for us because it is the only star close to us. And then since sun radiates into different wavelengths, scientists have studied and estimated that solar irradiance is around 1366 kilowatt per meter square. So what is solar irradiance? If we take unit area and keep it perpendicular to the as shown in the figure, so the incoming radiant flux passing through per meter square of this circle would be like 1366 kilojoule per second, and that is the 1366 kilowatt, and it is above the atmosphere. So if we measure at the surface of our Earth, then the solar radiant flux would be lowered because our atmosphere absorbs many wavelengths and some of the lights would be absorbed. If we know that this is the solar irradiance, solar luminosity, so the total energy coming from the sun, like the power, total radiant power from the sun can be calculated taking the formula like solar irradiance is also called solar constant. So if we know solar constant and the distance between sun and earth, solar luminosity can be calculated, and these values come up to 3.8 into 10 to the power 26 joule per second. So actually the question comes, so this solar radiation is coming into all wavelengths. If we see here the plot, we can see that the solar radiation is into the ultraviolet range, then into visual light, then in infrared, and then microwave and longer wavelengths like radio wavelengths. Since human eye can detect only the visual part of the electromagnetic spectrum, our sun to us it looks like yellow or sometimes white as shown in the top panel of the figure. But if we have some instrument which can gather radiation or photon in different wavelengths, we can measure the total incoming radiation or the solar flux. So to us, why the sun appears blue or yellow, little yellow or white? So I think most of the students know that black body radiation. So it is the total power, it is like a power density plotted against the wavelength. So here we can see that there are different curves, and this curves, what it tells actually? This tells that if we increase the temperature of a black body, then the wavelength at which maximum intensity would be radiated is the lower wavelength. So if we increase the temperature, so the wavelength at which maximum intensity comes is shifted towards lower wavelength. So like if I give an example, if we heat an iron metal, so if we heat little, then it becomes red, longer wavelength. Then if we heat more, it turns to like yellow. If you further heat, so it will shift towards lower wavelength. So in this curve, we can see that since our sunlight lies around the yellow or the visual part of the spectrum, the peak is in this range. So the temperature comes around 5000 Kelvin, as like our sun. So such plotting of density and wavelength is very important to know the star temperature, and star temperature is very much important to know, because then we can categorize different stars into different categories, which stars are very hot, which stars are very cold. And if we know the temperature of the star, we can also make their spectrum, or we can observe them into different wavelengths and know their composition, because each atom have a unique signature. So if we know that this light is coming from a star, have this much absorption line or emission line into different at different wavelengths, we can know the composition of a star as well. So what makes the sun shine? Because we discussed that there are a lot of radiation coming from the sun. So at the beginning of solar physics research, like hundreds years before, people proposed various things, that there may be some processes, chemical reaction or other things which may be giving this much energy. But what it was found that none of the processes discussed before could give the light which we actually receive, the total solar luminosity. Then very like a few decades back, it was proposed that nuclear fusion takes place at the core of the sun, in which the 4 hydrogen atom, as I discussed that sun is mainly made of hydrogen. So at the core of the sun, there is enough pressure due to the gravitation, and there the 4 hydrogen can come very much close against their repulsive forces, because protons, which is the hydrogen from which is at very high temperature, it means there is no electron has been stripped off from their atom. So these hydrogen can come closer only under a very strong pressure, or they have very high speed. So under very high speed and temperature and pressure, if they comes actually together, and when they come together, they feel attracted, and then forms the deuterium, as we can see 1H2, and then again deuterium combines with 1 hydrogen to form 3He, which is the 1 isotope, and then we can see that 2 He3 combines to make helium nucleus. So in this process of what this whole process is, converting 4 hydrogen into 1 helium nucleus, and in this process actually there is some mass loss, and that is a nuclear fusion. So if we see here, when we combine 4 hydrogen atom to fuse together to make 1 helium nucleus, the mass of helium nucleus is little less than the mass of 4 hydrogen atom. So it means in this process there is some mass loss, and according to Einstein mass energy equivalence, this mass could have converted into energy. So if this mass is converted into energy, this can supply actually the amount of radiation we are receiving from the sun. So it means nuclear fusion is the process which can explain the radiation coming from the sun. To give a comparison, here we can see that 1 gram of matter is around 10 to the power 14 joules of energy if we convert from the Einstein equation, because the value of c square is very large. C is the speed of light. So we can see that this much energy of 1 gram matter can be like sufficient to lit a bulb of 100 watt up to, we can see, 32,000 years. So to just give a comparison, that the mass loss can be sufficient to give energy what we receive from the sun. So if we just do simple calculation, so how much mass loss in the sun could have taken place over a time of billions of years, as the sun lifetime is billions of years, we can see that if we do simple calculation, we find that in the sun's core, solar core, 4 million tons of hydrogen is actually being lost per second. So if we take the billions of years of lifetime, we find that only 6.8 into 10 to the 19 gram of mass have been lost since the birth of the sun. So it seems a very big, huge mass actually. But if we compare it with the total mass of the sun, it is very much like a very tiny fraction of the solar mass. And even this mass loss continues due to fusion for a next billions of years, 5 billion at least, sun would be keep shining. But as I described before, the journey of a star or even our sun is not decided only by fusion. Fusion over a time changes, and then the core hydrogen burning into the core stops, then helium, then hydrogen burning into other cells of the solar spherical layers start. So this is not a linear way to convert hydrogen into helium, but this is just to give a comparison. Since energy is generated into the core of the sun, it is necessary to understand how this energy is coming to us. So what are the processes that energy from the core of the sun can travel up to us? So in this, what we see that at the core, as I described, into the center of the sun, energy is generated. And then this generated energy is mostly into the form of gamma ray and into heat. So this gamma ray, the gamma radiation starts to travel from core to outer layer of the sun. So up to some distance, it travels into the form of radiation. And that layer we can see here in the figure is marked with the radiation from interior. That is called also radiation zone. Because in the radiation zone, the radiation zone is transparent for the gamma ray. So the gamma ray actually can travel through this much distance and reach up to the at the end of the radiation zone. And then we have convection zone. Convection is another way to transport heat. As if we give an example of convection, when we boil a water, the hot water from the bottom of our utensil come in the top, and the cold water from the top goes into the down. So there is a rotation, we can say movement of particles, and then in this way energy is transported from one part of the heating system to another. So in this way, once the radiation travels up to the end of the radiation zone, then it further moves out into the using the process of convection. Because in convection zone there are some non-ionized atom, and then when I say non-ionized means they become opaque to light. While in the radiation zone, actually, which is the interior of the sun, no electrons left on atom to capture photons. So most of the photons just move freely into the radiation zone with some collision, scattering and all. And that's why it takes a lot of time for a photon to come from core to even outer layer of the sun, that is called photosphere. So what we see that generated light at the core, the energy at the core of the sun travels into the using radiation and then convection. And the distance over which they travel into the form of radiation and convection are called radiation zone and convection zone. And then we have the outer layer that is called the photosphere, from where the density is very much low there, and the light from there can actually again escape into the form of radiation, which we receive. So as I described before, that sun has a temperature of 5000 Kelvin. So that temperature is of the temperature of the photosphere. While at the core of the sun, as I described before, we need sufficient temperature, and there are solar models which have suggested that the temperature at the core is around 10 to the power at the order of millions Kelvin, and that's why the nuclear fusion can happen at that high temperature. While the temperature which we find from the black body radiation curve, considering the sun as a black body radiator, the temperature what we estimate around 5000 is the temperature of the photosphere. So if we compare here the density and temperature of the sun, so we can see that in the core, the left panel of the figure, we can see that at the core the density is very much high, and then temperature is also high. And as we move outward, we can see that up to convection zone, the density and temperature both drops. The same is also shown in the right panel of the figure. And we can, if we see the bottom panel, we can see that there is a reference for air, water, and gold to compare that how the density in the core, radiation zone and convection zone, compares with the well-known substance like air and water we had. So clearly we can see that density is very high into the core, and as we move out from the core up to the photosphere, temperature and density both drops slowly into the curve as shown. Then then as I described here, that we have a core, the radiation zone, then we have convection zone, and then we have photosphere. But this is not the only layers of the sun. These layers up to photosphere are called the interior of the sun. Like in the earth, we have core and mantle, and then we have outer crust. And then similarly, these are the solar interior layers. If we, like earth, have an atmosphere, in the same way, sun has atmosphere. And these atmospheres are named as chromosphere. We can see that after photosphere, we have again a very thin layer. We say that layer as a chromosphere, which has a temperature of around lower chromosphere has a temperature of around 4000, and then upper chromosphere has a temperature of around 10,000. And then we have the outermost layer of the sun, that is called the corona, which has a temperature again around millions degrees centigrade. So what it means that if we see the temperature profile here, as we are moving out from the photosphere, temperature actually in fact slightly decreases, but again rises very fast in the chromosphere. And then in the transition region, temperature rises very fast. And in corona, we can see that it is again rising up to the order of 1 million. So if we, as I described before, that in the sun, actually the source of energy is at the core of the sun. But if we are moving away from the photosphere, temperature is rising, and then it is maximum in the corona. So it is like against the thermodynamic principle, which says that if we are moving away from the source of heat, temperature should decrease. But in the solar case, we are looking that the corona has very much high temperature, although it is the outermost layer of the sun. It is very much away from the core, where the energy is generated due to nuclear fusion. So this problem into the solar physics is called coronal heating problem. And in fact, till today, there is not a consensus that why temperature rises very much, so much extremely into the coronal region or into the corona atmosphere. Although there are various theories proposed and many attempts have been done, and recently there is a consensus that there are different processes locally into the corona, like reconnections and all. So I would not go into the detail, but for the students, I would just like to mention that this problem is like a burning problem in the solar physics. Why corona has a very large temperature, which is much away from the core region of the sun. So as I described here, that different layer of the sun has different temperature. We can see here also that different layer have a different temperature. So as I told before, that if we image a sun into different wavelength, the sun would appear different, because different wavelengths would sample or would observe the different layer of the sun. For example, if we are observing a sun into a wavelength of like as shown here into the figure, into the red color, if you see 304 angstrom. So this wavelength is sensitive to the temperature of 50,000 Kelvin. So it means if we observe the sun into this wavelength only, using a narrow band filter, we would look the region of the sun which had the temperature of 50,000 Kelvin. That is the transition region or chromosphere. But if we observe the sun into the wavelength like 4,500 angstrom, as shown with the yellow color into the middle panel, we would see that we can see the photosphere, which is the temperature again of the around 5,000 Kelvin. So it means using the different wavelength, we in fact can look the different height, different atmosphere of the sun. And these are the images of the sun at the same time taken into the different wavelengths. So what we interestingly see here, that the features into the different images are different actually. In some of the feature, we can see that there are some spots on the sun, while on the other images, we are looking the brightenings. So it means that the layers which are observed into lower wavelength, like extreme ultraviolet wavelength, if you see, they are showing brightness just above the spots on the sun. So it means there are one phenomena happening over the region of solar spots, sunspots, and then above the same at the same location, but higher into the atmosphere, there is some heating which is being observed into other wavelengths like extreme ultraviolet wavelength. So such imaging techniques provides, it is a tool to give information about the sun and sampling different layer of the sun. As I described before, that most of the time what we see with the naked eye are the radiation which we observe sensitive to our naked human eye is sensitive to like only visible range of the sun. And we cannot see the chromosphere, which mainly emits into extreme ultraviolet wavelength. However, we can observe the chromosphere and corona, which is the outer atmosphere of the sun, when total solar eclipse happens. This is because if we, as I described before, the density of the chromosphere and corona is very less. So such a small density the intensity of light coming from the chromosphere and corona is very small in compared to the light coming from the photosphere. So we cannot observe chromosphere and corona of a very much dim intensity until we block the major source of light like the photospheric light coming from the sun. So one such blocking of photospheric light happens at the time of total solar eclipse. At that time, photosphere is completely blocked, and then we can see here the reddish like region, that is the chromosphere region, and that is due to the transition of hydrogen electron from orbit number 3 to 2, and that will give the wavelength of around 6563 angstrom. So that is the line emission we can see. And if we see the corona, the particles into the coronal region actually scatter the photospheric light falling onto it, and that is this process of scattering is called Thomson scattering. So corona can be seen into Thomson scattered white light only when we block the light coming from the photosphere. Here I give an example of a solar photosphere observed into the wavelength 4500 by the instrument on board Solar Dynamics Observatory launched by NASA. But here we see that on the surface of the sun photosphere, we can see some spots, and these spots are known as sunspots. These sunspots appear black. I would describe into the coming slide why temperature at the sun, why these spots look black, what it means. And if we zoom this, make the figure bigger of the sunspots, we can clearly see that they are very dark actually. And then on the surface of the sun with high resolution, we can see this granulation, like the bubbling of, like we see bubbling of water when we heat. So we can see such granulation on the surface of the sun because heat is coming from the bottom. And then, as I described before, just below the photosphere, we have convection layer, convection zone. So in the convection zone, the plasma, hot plasma from the bottom rises, and the slow and the cool plasma sinks back into down. So that's why in the granulation figure, as in the movie, we can see that there are some brighter regions and then there are some darker regions. So the plasma, cool plasma is going down. There we are looking some temperature and decrease in temperature, and then rise in temperature where the granules comes and like appears. So if we further look the sunspots into high resolution, what we found that temperature of the sunspots region is in fact less than the photospheric temperature, while the magnetic field is very much large. Its value can go like 2000 to 3000 Gauss. And such measurements of magnetic field on the into the sunspots is actually mainly done from the Zeeman effect. Most of the students would study or might have studied that Zeeman effect can, we can study Zeeman effect and then know the light source coming from the magnetic field region have an splitting. And with that splitting, we can know how much a magnetic field, from which magnetic field the light is coming from. So what interestingly, we find that sunspots also have regions like umbra, penumbra, and then granule, as I described before. So umbra has a very high like magnetic field, and the temperature is very much less if you see here. So how this magnetic field is actually created, which is coming into the form of sunspots on the photosphere. So to generate magnetic field into most of the celestial body, even into our Earth or any planets, and even in the stellar bodies, there is a theory called dynamo theory. This theory proposes that how the conducting fluid in the rotation, if there is a convection, so how a convective rotating fluid can generate a magnetic field if it is like rotating for a long time. So dynamo theory can give a way to describe generation of magnetic field over celestial bodies, and then it can sustain for a long time. So in this process, if I quickly describe what happens that due to rotation, at least into the case of sun's rotation is called differential rotation. So it is unlike to Earth. Our Earth rotates into 24 hours. So the orbital, like on its axis, it rotates into 24 hours. but sun has a differential rotation. It means the solar equator rotates faster, while as we move towards the pole, it rotates slowly. So it means that the scientists have studied that solar equator can rotate into 27 days, while the pole of the sun, polar region of the sun, rotates into 36 to 37 days. So it means due to this differential rotation, the magnetic field below the surface would be winded, and this winding would continue, and then the magnetic field lines would coil up. And such coiling up is shown here for a single line, actually single magnetic field lines. And then we have a huge, there are many magnetic field lines, and such coilings would generate kink into the magnetic field. And this kink again can rise and come out of the surface. And it can appear as a sunspots. If I go here, the movie shows clearly how magnetic field inside the sun actually generates. And then we can see that it is breaking the layer of the sun photosphere and appear as a dark structure onto the photosphere. We can clearly see. So magnetic fields are in dipole, and that's why the sun spots are always into pairs. And one sun spot is the North Pole and the other is the South Pole. So why they appear dark? Actually, as the magnetic field lines are rising here, we can see into the figure, as I described before, actually, that convection brings energy up to the photosphere. So when the magnetic field rises, actually this rise of magnetic field stops actually convection. So there is a decrease into the convection from into that place where magnetic field is rising, and that's why the temperature at that point where magnetic field comes breaking the photosphere becomes cooler. So due to the inhibition of convection, and that's why the sunspots are the region of hot, very strong magnetic field but low temperature, and they appear dark because when we image this photosphere into visible light, the intensity from there, the region of sunspots is less, and they appear dark. So they are in fact the cool surface actually on the photosphere. So if we compare the sunspots region into different wavelengths, so to give an example here, one image of the sun is taken into 4500 angstrom, and then another into 304 angstrom. Why I want to focus on different wavelengths? Because students should note that if we image any substance into different wavelength, we will actually sample its different height, because the light coming from different layers are as I described in the Planck-Wien displacement law, the thermal black body radiation. If we increase the temperature, the wavelength at which maximum intensity comes actually shifted towards lower wavelength. So since the higher atmosphere of the sun are very hot, so if we take the wavelength sensitive to high temperature or ionization, we can sample actually the higher atmosphere of the sun. So we can see that into the higher atmosphere, the location of the sunspots are shown here in the right panel with some bright features. This says that there are some magnetic processes in the upper atmosphere of the sun as well, and that's why there is some heating. So now I will describe that sun don't have always the same state of sunspots. Sometimes sun have a very huge number of sunspots, and sometimes it has a less number of sunspots. And this is called solar cycle. The returning of sun into its original position, original situation of having minimum number of sunspots are called solar minima, while the time at which sun has maximum number of sunspots are called solar maxima. And scientists over an observation and the theory of a dynamo, they have actually concluded that sun has an 11-year cycle. It means if we see here the plot, the bottom panel, we can see that each after 11 years, sun has the maximum number of sunspots as plotted on the y-axis. However, this is not the very strict rule. If we clearly see very clearly, each peak is not repeating after 11 years. There is sometimes it is 13 years, sometimes 10 years. So on average, solar cycle is called 11 year. But there are times actually, if we go into the past, see around the year of 1675 to 1715, there are no sunspots. We can see that, and that region is noted into the literature as a Maunder minimum. Maunder is the name of scientist actually who was looking the sun over a long period of time and cataloging the number of sunspots. So what they found that in this region there was no sunspot, and in fact this time is also actually coincides with the time of a little ice age into the Europe and North America. At that time most of the lakes were frozen and all. So although there are even debate today that whether the little ice age which Europe and North America observed or witnessed, whether it is due to absence of sunspots for a long period of time, or it is there are other factors like volcanic activities, and those things have governed the little ice age into this continent. So if we see the top panel, we can see that at the time of solar maxima there are many sunspots around year 2000, while in the 2004 there are less number of sunspots, and these sunspots are not constant actually. They decay over a time. Their lifetimes may be even up to 1 month, and some are very short-lived. So we can see that sunspot marks the activity on the sun, magnetic activity. So another type of activity is called solar flare. And as I am moving to the couple of slides next, I am building actually some terms which would be helpful for the students to know. So what is solar flare? On the sun, sometimes there are some phenomena called magnetic reconnection, and because of that, huge flash of light appears over a localized region. And this flash of light actually is observed in different wavelength, mostly into the X-ray and UV. We can see that right panel have different wavelength, and again such flash of light is shown into different wavelengths. So this is called solar flare, sudden flash of light, and this changes the flux of X-ray flux which we receive at the Earth. And such X-ray flux are important for our Earth system because they ionize the ionosphere, and again the ultraviolet increases, that leads to atmospheric reactions once it reaches to Earth. Then another type of activity is called mass loss from the coronal mass ejection actually. So I would focus on this topic into more detail. So what we find that from the sun, sometimes there is a huge ejection of mass. It means that from the outer layer of the sun, some huge mass gets detached, and then it moves into the interplanetary medium. And as I described before, the solar flare. So sometimes solar flare and CME is associated, while there are many times when there are flares and no CME. So these are the magnetized plasma which are expelled from the solar corona, and when they travel into space, their speed can be measured. So if we see here once in the top panel, the speed into the beginning of this CME is very high. It reaches up to 2,500 kilometers per second. And then it slowly decelerates and comes up to the speed of 1,000. With this speed, most of the CME reach to Earth into the 2 to 4 days actually. So why we study actually CME? So because such mass ejections are a huge magnetized plasma blob, and once they arrive to the Earth, they can do lot of space weather actually. So I will discuss those processes and effects which such CME can lead, because these CMEs are huge. Sometimes its mass is like 10 to the power 12 kilograms. So we can see that it is millions of ton mass actually, and they are moving with the speed of around thousands or few hundreds per second. So once they arrive, they can interact with our Earth's magnetic field actually. Then from the sun, another process of mass loss is called solar wind. So solar wind is from the outer atmosphere of the sun, there is continuous evaporation of charged particles. Like when we heat a water, there is a continuous evaporation. Just to give an analogy, although the processes of solar wind accelerations are different, so from the outer layer of the sun, lot of solar wind particles move from the sun and they travel into the space. So those particles, stream of particles, are called solar wind. They have different speed. Around the equatorial region, they have a speed of around 400 kilometers per second, as shown into the left panel of the figure. While in the polar region, they move with a high speed, around 800 kilometers per second, at the time of solar minima. So scientists have tried to understand why these two states of solar wind is there, which also varies with the solar cycle. And then the left panel, which I am showing here, is the speed measured from an spacecraft called Ulysses, which took an polar orbit around the sun and measured its speed at different latitude. So the observation of solar wind was actually confirmed long back. Actually, people have seen the comet's tail, and we can see that once a comet comes close to the sun while orbiting, it forms a gas and dust tail. So the gas tail is actually the ionized plasma of the comet nucleus, and then we have the dusty tail. So if we see the location of sun, we can see that the solar wind, radial solar wind, is giving direction, actually shaping the direction of gas tail. And with this observation, solar wind, the possibility of solar wind was predicted. And then later it was confirmed by space missions, from like the Mariner spacecraft launched by NASA. So to sum up what I have described till now, there are three processes of mass loss on the sun. One is the nuclear fusion, in which around 4 million tons of mass per second is getting lost into the core of the sun, and that mass loss is leading to energy generation, and that is the reason why our sun shines, as I described before. Though the energy from the core of the sun travels through different processes, reach up to photosphere, and then we have various magnetic phenomena, dynamo theory, to explain the magnetic phenomena, sunspots, coronal mass ejection in the upper atmosphere of the sun. And then other two processes of mass loss are coronal mass ejection, which I say CME, and then solar wind, which is the continuous evaporation of particles from the sun. So CME also is one way to by which sun is losing the mass, but that is the episodic. CMEs are not always, actually, they are episodic. The time sun is into its maximum phase, the maximum CME one day can happen 4 to 5. While when the sun is in minima, it means that there are less number of sunspots on the surface of the sun. There may be very few CME, maybe in 3 day 1 or in 3 day 1 to 2 CME. So it means that CME is the one way to lose the mass. Then we have continuous evaporation of particles from the sun, that is solar wind, and then we have nuclear fusion. Adding the CME and solar wind mass loss, scientists have concluded that they actually sum up to 1.5 million tons per second. So it means, considering the three processes, the sun is losing 5.5 million tons of mass every second. It looks a very huge mass, actually. But even with this rate, the sun will lose only 0.05% of its current mass over its lifetime, taking the billions of years, which is the billions of years. So it means, although these processes are losing a lot of solar mass, but sun is very huge and very massive. So this mass loss is very much insignificant. But with this mass loss, even our Earth orbit is slightly shifting every year 1.6 centimeter. If we just take the Kepler's law and consider the gravitational force, how much weakening of the solar gravitational force would be on the Earth, if we do a simple calculation, it would come around less than an inch per year the Earth is shifting away. So it seems that the solar mass loss is not affecting our Earth system very much. While in the beginning I have described that these processes on the sun actually have huge impact on our life. So why it is so? So it means that this mass loss is not the complete story. So what is the complete story? I would now describe. We know that sun governs the weather. So that is the terrestrial weather. We may have rain and then storms, sometimes fog, and then tornado. Those happens due to different pressure gradient into our terrestrial atmosphere. Into the same way, like the sun governs the terrestrial weather, which affects the humans, in the same way, the sun governs the weather into space. And when I say weather into space, it means that into the space near our like few hundred kilometers above the atmosphere, difference in the electric and magnetic field, plasma density, and these things actually are very much affects the satellite into space. Like we have satellites into the space, and as we are becoming more and more dependent on the technology, we are launching more and more satellites, and then we are sending astronauts into space. So if we know that what is the weather into space, which is mainly decided by, governed by actually sun, so we would have better control to save our satellites and save our and to predict the weather actually. Like when we, to give an example for the students, when we move into like tomorrow we are going to some place, we see the weather, whether it is cloudy, rainy, then we prepare according to that. In the same way, if we want to explore the space, we must know what is the weather condition, and that weather condition is mainly the magnetic field, electric field, plasma density, temperature. And then another thing happens when such a huge, as I described, coronal mass ejections, when such huge coronal mass ejection reach to the earth, actually they disturb the earth's magnetic field, and typical disturbance is shown into the right panel of the figure. We can see that one event in March 1989, actually one CME from the sun arrived to the earth, and once it arrived to the earth, we can see that earth's magnetic field, which is plotted onto y-axis, is actually disturbed, and there is a huge decrease in the magnetic field of the earth by at least few hundred nanotesla. And to the, if we see that on 14th March 1989, the magnetic field of the earth goes to very minimum, and this is well studied event. And in fact, this event, when this CME arrived, it led to the damage of the transformers in the Canada for at least 9 hours. So we can see that coronal mass ejections, when they arrive to the earth, they can damage even the technology on the ground, and of course they can damage the our satellites into space. And since we are highly dependent on to space technology, our daily life like television and other things which is governed by satellite things, GPS communication, and then radio wave communication, these all would be disrupted. To give an example, why the CME coming from the sun, mass ejection coming from the sun actually affects the earth. See here, earth has a magnetic field, we all know, and then the plasma, magnetized plasma coming from the sun is interacting with the earth's magnetic field, and we can see that it is pushing the day side magnetosphere of the earth and breaking the magnetic field lines, and these lines are again going back and joining due to the, so what we actually see here in this movie, that our earth's magnetic field, which is the magnetosphere of our earth, completely deflects the plasma coming from the sun, and some of the plasma gets entry into the polar region of the earth. We can see here in the North Pole there is a light. This light is called auroral light. So when the plasma from the sun gets entry into the polar region, they ionize the atmospheric particle oxygen and nitrogen, and that's why we see the beautiful color in green and yellow and reddish light. So it means that coronal mass ejections are very important, and they can lead to space weather. So again, I would like to repeat that space weather is the change disturbances into the Earth's upper atmosphere, which affects the technology into space, or the ground-based technology, which affects human life and health. So another way to illustrate the space weather is shown here. Plasma and the radiation coming from the sun due to solar flare or coronal mass ejection have effect onto the satellite. Suppose some energetic particles can damage the satellite electronics, then they can ionize the ionosphere, and we know that we have a radio communication due to the reflection of radio waves from the atmosphere. Then that height would be changed. Some satellites would be affected, and then we have different flights which go into the polar route. And if such particles, as I described before, can get entry into the polar region of the Earth, they can disturb our astronauts or even the passengers. So it means that space weather have different effects. So to categorize here, I have mentioned 3 types of effect. One is called radio blackouts. Due to solar flares, as I mentioned before, huge X-ray change in X-ray fluctuations, X-ray intensity takes place. And such X-ray arrives to Earth in 8 minutes. So they modify the ionosphere and consequently the radio communication would be disturbed. It can affect airline communication and high frequency radio operators. Then we have radiation storms, which is mainly due to coronal mass ejection. So such huge mass from the sun can arrive to the Earth into few hours, and these CMEs are very fast. So they drive a shock wave, and then these shock waves can accelerate the particles into solar wind. And these particles again can have damaging effects onto airline communication, and they can ionize the ionosphere. And they can impact astronaut or even can lead to failure to satellites. Then we have another effect of CME is called geomagnetic storms. Geomagnetic storm is the change in the horizontal components of magnetic field. As I have shown into the previous slides, that Earth's magnetic field got there was a decrease into the Earth's magnetic field, and such a decrease into the Earth's magnetic field actually can lead to various disruptions. Like we have electric power grid, and they can get failure because of it. There would be fluctuations in the magnetic field onto the surface of Earth, and then they would lead to induced current into the circuit. So our power grids can get failure. Then radio communication, like radio navigation, GPS system can be affected because more particles into the ionosphere would come and ionize to the system. So it means space weathers are very important, and technology is vulnerable to such conditions into space. And that's why there is a continuous attempt to understand coronal mass ejection. So we can see here into the movie that a CME is launched actually from the sun into the top panel, and we can see that they are moving outward. So this is a movie made by Stereo mission. The Stereo is a twin spacecraft launched by NASA in year 2006, and they have capability to track a coronal mass ejection from sun where it gets originated to even Earth or beyond. So such continuous tracking of CME, their arrival time estimation, and their consequences to our Earth's magnetospheric and ionospheric system has been studied in couple of last 2-3 decades actually. So we can see that there are various attempts, and in fact recently few missions from like Solar Orbiter from the European Union, and then Parker Solar Probe from the NASA has been launched, and we can see the orbit of these missions named with like Solar Orbiter, and then we can say Parker Probe. If we clearly see in the movie Solar Probe Plus, we can see that into the center there is a sun. So these missions are going very close to the sun. And why they are going close to the sun? Because those regions closer to the sun has not been actually probed by the by the measurements, by the detector. So what exactly these missions are doing, they actually are taking the instruments very close to the sun and sampling the plasma at different distance between the sun and Earth. By this sampling, we would know how this coronal mass ejection evolved from the sun to Earth, how they are moving, how their dynamics, are temperature, are their acceleration is changing over a distance between sun and Earth. And then we have continuous solar wind from the sun. As I described before, there are 2 types of solar wind, one slow solar wind, and then we have one fast solar wind. So even the acceleration process of solar wind, what is leading such acceleration from the corona, such charged particles are always coming. So why they are coming, how much density they carry, how their electric and magnetic field changes over a heliocentric distances when they move. Such questions can be answered if these spacecraft go into the very close to the sun and continuously sample the different environment around the sun. We can see that this movie is from the one instrument on Parker Solar Probe launched by NASA. The name of the instrument is called Whisper. So wide imaging this instrument actually images the distance between sun and earth, and we can see that due to development in technology, we are at the juncture where we can actually track even particles coming from the sun, and we can see the particles moving from the sun and moving up to coming closer to the earth. So tracking such particles during their kinematic and thermodynamic evolution, we would know the physics of their physics and what are the forces driving their such evolution. With the growing trend into such study like space weather, which is very important, and people all around the globe are looking for various questions and then trying to answer that why such mass ejections coming from the sun can affect our space technology. India is also planning to launch its first solar mission, and we can see that this name of the mission is Aditya L1. It would be orbiting around the first Lagrangian point of the Sun-Earth system. So we can see that this is the first Indian solar mission, and it would carry actually several instruments that is called payload, and we can see that different payloads are actually developed by different institutions in India, like Indian Institute of Astrophysics, Physical Research Laboratory. So these are the institutions who are working to understand sun into a very depth, because as I described before, sun is the central star of our solar system, and since the unique location of earth gives a way to survive life, but the sun has some like other effects of space weather. They can damage to space technology, our satellites, and those things should be clearly understood. Why the sun is behaving sometimes as a solar maxima, sometimes there are more number of sunspots. When actually there are more number of sunspots, there are more number of coronal mass ejections. It means that when there are more number of sunspots on the sun, huge number of CMEs are coming every day onto the earth, and such mass coming to earth system and disturbing our earth's magnetic field should be properly understood, and there should be an attempt to in fact make a prediction. Like we have a very good progress into terrestrial weather, we can accurately predict that tomorrow the weather condition would be like this, the rain would be there, this much cloud would be there, but predicting the space weather has not been achieved actually anywhere around the globe. So all around the globe, people are trying to study the sun into detail and see that whether space weather can be predicted, which would be like very much serious concern into the coming days when we would be becoming more dependent onto the technology, space technology. So then with this talk, what I would like to give a take home message every student can remember, because I understand that I introduced many new terms for the school students, so they can go to my talk again, and if they have any questions they can ask in comment box. I would try to have a look, and they can also look into the Google some terms. But what they should learn at least from this talk is we are unique to have a perfect location on sun and earth. This is very important, and that's why we are actually present. Otherwise, if earth would not be in the habitable zone around the sun, life would not have been possible, and then we cannot even understand the sun, universe, or galaxy. And then the other point is sun sustains life on earth, but there are extreme solar activity like coronal mass ejections that can disrupt space and ground-based technological system, which can affect our life very badly. And then therefore it is important to understand how these coronal mass ejections from the sun evolve, how when they arrive, and what type of space weather events they can lead to. And if such weather conditions prevail for a very long time, what would be the climate into the space? That is called space climate. And to address these things, new missions in Europe, in America, and even in India is being launched. And probably in the coming days, people's work and the scientists' work into this direction would help us to understand better our sun and earth system, or we can say sun-earth connection. In this talk, I have shown some movie which is made by some of the scientists, and they have kept on their web pages. So I took from there. I gratefully acknowledge them actually for borrowing their material and making this presentation. And I thank you with this talk, but I would like to end my talk with this note that astronomy constantly reminds people of two very much important things. And these two important points are in fact contradictory with each other. What are the 2 points? First is universe is infinite. When I say infinite means we have a very vast universe. We even don't know how big it is, and it is continuously expanding. But we are very tiniest fraction of importance. So our Earth in the whole universe is just like a dot, and our life is supported here. In fact, there are attempts to understand if life, intelligent life elsewhere exists or not. And there is a series of experiments being done all around the globe to understand if extraterrestrial life exists. And then second point is life is rare and precious. So a home as beautiful and unique as Earth does not come often. We must protect it because from this talk and looking at galactic figure and many billions of stars into our galaxy, it is obvious that we are unique to sustain life. And when we are unique, we must protect it. And I would like to end my talk with the quote of Carl Sagan, who says, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. So we are here and then to know itself so that we can know the cosmos being in the cosmos. And I would like to thank every audience and I am ready to take the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this such an informative presentation. And now we have very small time, and we will be selecting some very few questions from audiences. We have in comment box. One question is from Ganesh Mishra. He's asking, what is the cause of differential rotation in sun? I will be happy if you answer this.
Yeah, so actually the differential rotation of the sun is not very much properly understood. But since there is a convection into the sun, the convective layers actually with the rotation makes the differential rotation. So I think unlike the Earth, sun is into the plasma state. So we would have differential rotation.
Okay, thank you. And there is one question I can take now. There is one question from Yuval Makwanas. He's asking, what are brown dwarfs? So,
Yeah, so actually,
if you tell us.
yeah. So thank you for the question. Actually, I have not touched this topic, but when stars are formed, actually, so very light stars, as I told in my talk, that mass of a star decides the evolutionary journey of the star. So if a star in the beginning is of very less mass, it would not develop into the form of into the main sequence, and that would remain as a brown dwarf.
Okay, thank you so much for answering these questions. Now, because we have some time constraint, we have already spent about 1.5 hours, and I sincerely apologize for mishap with this audio for some time. And now I invite our chairman, Professor B.M. Dixit sir, for his concluding remark.
Thank you, Lalit, for calling me. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. Okay. First, I would like to thank Waghesh for giving such an exhaustive, around an hour and 10 minutes lecture, where he has almost completed all the aspects of what our our sun is going through. And he has started with such a wonderful pictures of early evolution of a star. So all the youngsters have a feeling that how a star is born, and then how it evolved at any uh, uh, in its life cycle, how it evolves. It goes to say red giant, super giants, and so on and so forth, by converting itself into white dwarf. As a very enthusiastic uh, listener has asked that what are brown dwarfs. So what Waghish has done for all of us is that he has created the environment, the atmosphere that we can start thinking in a real sense that how sun not only giving us light in one sense, and from that light we are deriving some life form, life on earth, but sun's importance to earth's existence is far more complex, far more have a far reaching implications. uh, so many of us might have thinking that why we are doing research on sun, because it's all right, it is giving us light, and we are thankful to sun that it is giving us warmth and daylight, so it's all right. But Waghe's lecture from on this topic has explored us with an idea that why this solar research is so important, because I am sure that he is under time constraints also. He might have few more things to suggest, that these solar winds, these geomagnetic, the impact of CMEs have already eroded few of the planets with their atmosphere and so on and so forth. We have witnessed that Mars has lost, Venus has become red, rather a hot planet because of the greenhouse effect of the habitable and non-habitable planets that Wagis has covered up. So the location of Earth and Sun and origin of our life on Earth and intelligence in us to ask these questions and try to address these issues and try to bring this human wisdom and knowledge to a different domains, rather to the unlimited, infinite domain of the universe. Yet, universe is finite, I am quite sure. It is not infinite, but anyway, it is so big that you can consider it as an infinite, because he has very aptly shown few of the slides where the dimension of time, dimension of distance has been well understood by us, that the closest another star is around 4.3 light year, which is a very far off situation, and human made things have reached up to a little further than 20 AU, 200 AU that he told us. That was the Voyager event from NASA. What was more compelling for all of us is that these are the areas where research is coming up, and this is a growing area of research in one sense, because so much research has been going on in material science and others, so they are getting a little sorry, it is getting rather a little overloaded. But these are the real upcoming fields where people are putting their best brain, and all of my students who have listened to these important features of this, that there are unsolved stories. Still we are absolutely clueless that why corona has such a deep steep rise in temperature. Somebody has asked very aptly that what is the reason of differential rotational speed. Yes, you have some thermodynamical parameters to explain that different materials have different density, then different density have a different angular momentum, and angular momentum conservation gives you a different kind of a dynamics. But still, that has to be modelized उसको मॉडल करना है, उसको मॉडल बनाकर समझने की जरूरत है। वागीश ने जो हम लोगों को डेटा के लिए एकदम अपरिचित, एकदम अचंभित कर देने वाली हैं। यह shown few of the figure, few of the films। मुझे लगता है कि जितने लोगों ने वो CME और सोलर विंड के आने से जियोमैग्नेटिक इफेक्ट्स के ऊपर होने वाले फिल्म को देखा, उन सभी लोगों के लिए बहुत ही एक्साइटिंग और चैलेंजिंग लगा होगा कि अर्थ की मैग्नेटिक फील्ड ना होने पर हम शायद इरोड हो चुके होते अब तक। अर्थ का मैग्नेटिक फील्ड हम लोग को बहुत सीरियस प्रोटेक्शन देता है फ्रॉम सच स्टॉर्म्स फ्रॉम सन। सन ने ही हमें जीवन दिया है और वही हमारे मारने का भी सामान भेजता है उधर से, लेकिन बीच में अर्थ ने कुछ अपने लिए बना लिया है। मैं सिंपल शब्दों में कह रहा हूँ, एक ऐसी डिफेंस मैकेनिज्म जिससे कि हम उसके द्वारा भेजे जाने वाले बहुत सारे खराब असर को खत्म करते हैं। और इन्होंने बहुत ब्यूटीफुली वो दिखाया कि अरोरा किस तरीके से डेवलप होता है पोलर रीजन में। एक अरोरा ऑस्ट्रेलिसिस कहलाता है जो साउथ पोल में बनता है, और अरोरा बोरालिसिस कहते हैं जो नॉर्थ पोल में होता है, जो लाइट का मिराकुलस मतलब मिराकुलस इफेक्ट दिखाता है वो लाइट का। वहां पर लाइट लाइक अ रेन जैसा दिखाई पड़ता है। हम लोगों ने ऐसा पढ़ा है, मैंने देखा तो नहीं है, लेकिन वागेश ने उसके लिए भी बताया कि किस तरीके से पोलर रीजन में कुछ पेनिट्रेशन हो रहा है सोलर रेडिएशन का, सोलर विंड्स का, और वहां जाकर वो कुछ असर डाल रहे हैं चीजों के ऊपर। तो इट वाज रियली अ फैंटास्टिक presentation from Dr. Vagesh. I am really thankful to you. You seems to be very young, but your understanding of the topics and your understanding of the things are too deep, too you are very what you can say engrossed in your topics. आपके द्वारा बताए जाने के रास्ते से हम लोग ये समझ पा रहे हैं कि आपके दिलो दिमाग पर वो हमेशा चलता है ये स्टोरी टेलिंग, और आपने जितने अच्छे तरीके से हम सबको ये सुनाया है, मुझे लगता है कि ये बहुत ही इंस्पिरेशनल होगा हम सभी के लिए। मैंने तो बहुत सी चीजें जानी है, और मैं कुछ एक कोर्स भी पढ़ाता हूँ कभी कभी स्पेस से रिलेटेड, तो मैं इनमें से कुछ चीजों को जरूर से अपने लेक्चर्स में शामिल कर दूंगा। जो सन के ऊपर मैं थोड़ा बहुत कुछ बोलता हूँ, इसमें से कुछ चीजें मैंने आज आपके द्वारा सुनी है, और मैं उन्हें अपने आगे के लेक्चर्स में जरूर से डालूंगा। With this word, I am really thankful to Vagesh, to all of my students, my colleagues, my fraternity of teachers, researchers, scientists who have joined us and making this event successful. I am really thankful to all of you. Lalit, I am really very excited to be part of this whole idea, and I will always love to be in these type of meetings. So I'm really thankful to you also. Thank you, Vagesh, again for such a lucid and effective presentation. Surprised by seeing your all accumulation of all your slides and other thing. You have very well acknowledged the efforts of others also. So you have also told our students that when you do something from courtesy others, then you have to acknowledge that. That is the scientific community's unsaid ethics we follow. So आपने उन सारी चीजों का मुजाहरा किया है, आपने उन सारी चीजों को सबको समझाने की कोशिश की है, इसके लिए मेरा आपसे तहे दिल से शुक्रिया है। थैंक यू वेरी मच। ओवर टू यू ललित।
Thank you so much, sir, for your concluding remark, and I'm really happy to host this on our platform. And since now it's about more than 1 hour and 30 minutes, and once again I sincerely apologize for mishap with our audio, and there was some issue with my laptop. And Before moving to this end of this segment, I would like to thank our chairman, Professor Dixit sir, for the unconditional support for such initiative. And sir, because of your support, we are able to do this, and will continue to explore unknown territories if this support is lifeline for such initiative. Thank you so much, sir, for chairing this session. Now, when we are moving to the last segment, I would like to invite you for the next upcoming lecture in our lecture series. So we will be about formation of solar system, and we have very special guest for this upcoming lecture, who works with the rocks from space. We call them meteorites, to answer the fundamental questions, how the solar system was formed, and from where these rocks come, what is asteroid belt, and what we can get information from. And he has worked with the same very field. That is the difference. When we are talking about some field, we get the expert from that. So we will be having Dr. Manish Sanghani with us. He has completed his thesis from Center of Star and Planet Formation, University of Copenhagen, Denmark. He will be us with next week at the same time, at the same platform, and the same day. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I take this opportunity to invite you for the next lecture. And for today, we close the session. Thank you so much for all being present.